2004, a year where many things happened, like Greece winning the European Championship. And probably some other things, but I was a kid back then, so why should I have cared about anything else but video games? 2004 is often said to be one of the best years in gaming, some even saying it is the best year ever. Is it truly the case? Let's find out. Also, you're allowed to insult me in the comments if I miss one of your favorite games from this year. It would be boring if I start talking about all the games you would know that will show up anyways, right? We all know there will be Metal Gear Solid 3, Half-Life 2 and a bunch of those other games that you can't just miss from 2004. So let's start with games that maybe didn't have the most sales or the best ratings, but are nowadays considered cult classics from this year, or just some of my more personal picks. Drakengard 1, where back in the day I never thought it will lead to one of my favorite games ever. Drakengard 3. You expected me to say Nier or Nier Automata, didn't you? The first Drakengard is an interesting game. I think that's the best way to put it. It's the first game Yoko Taro has directed, and while the gameplay is not that fun, the story goes places that will make you think, alright, I don't quite get it, but I do quite get it. Another game that got fairly middling reviews from a company that is now beloved is from Software that were not really known at that point yet, because most of the games also didn't really got high ratings to put them onto the map. Kuon was their try-added survival horror franchise that now is mostly known for being one of the most expensive PlayStation 2 games to buy. It's an okay game, but not some kind of underrated horror masterpiece, and certainly not worth $300, but what game is? The American version of it is even more expensive, gotta love the current retro market. You really wanna know a horror game released in the same year that is worthy of carrying the title of being a masterpiece? Fatal Frame 2, that released in Europe in 2004 but 2003 in America, so it does not count even if it should. There's a couple of games in here that released in different years in different countries, but I don't want to mention that info all the time, so let's just imagine they all came out at the same time in every western country, otherwise I would have to remove tons of these games. With that out of the way, let's crown the actual horror master of 2004, Siren. What makes it special is that you can sidetrack the Chibito, which are basically zombies, and see through their eyes, which gives it this special atmosphere, having to remember their roots and everything to plan your own way through the stages. There's just something so thrilling about being able to see yourself hiding through their eyes sometimes. It's also really obtuse, so if you try to tell me you ever beat it without a guide, I can easily brand you as a liar. Or maybe your brain is really just that big and I apologize for calling you a liar. For even more horror, there was also Silent Hill 4 that came out that year, and it was branded as the black sheep of the franchise so far, if people only knew how much worse it could get. In comparison to that, we also got the very first Monster Hunter, where it's kinda the other way around. The newer titles are more beloved since they aim at a more casualized audience that likes things to be fast, so their sales went up like crazy everywhere instead of only being a big seller in Japan. I think if you told 95% of people who started with World to go back to the earlier titles, they would count those as horror. You really have to be in the right mindset for them. After horror, you need some time to relax again and maybe to also grind, so how about a sweet selection of RPGs you could get in 2004? Xenosaga 2 came out that year, and while it's not as bad as people say, it's also not that great either. I just really love the Xeno franchise and use any opportunity that I can to talk about it. Maybe to also remind people to play these games. Very easy to emulate, and there's HD texture packs that make it look better than any HD remaster will, probably. So go play them, since Bandai Namco does not like free money. The worst thing about the game is Cosmos' redesign. Luckily they fixed it in 3. Staying on the topic of Monolith Soft, there's also the First Button title for you from 2004. A great JRPG where you have a card battle system and it's way more fantasy inspired than sci-fi like Xenosaga. Nowadays you can also get it on Steam or the Switch, and please do. I think the sales of it were pretty damn bad. Fans of Nippon Ichi also got La Pucelle Tactics and Phantom Brave. Buy Phantom Brave 2 when it comes out, please. To shorten the wait for Disgaea 2. I know it's pronounced Disgaea, but I just think it's funny to say it the wrong way. Both of them being really cute strategy RPGs with some of the best sprites in the business. I miss them a lot. I'm not on the total hater side of the new 3D models and think they're pretty cute too, but nothing beats those sprites. If you had enough friends that had enough money for 4 Game Boy Advances and 4 dumb cables, you even had a multiplayer JRPG with Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, a game I had back then even though I didn't have a GBA. I never played it once in its intended glory. Not the best game to play by yourself, but it still had that special charm, and I'm a bit sad they dropped the whole Crystal Chronicles universe kinda after the Wii and DS games. Not a JRPG, but since we are talking about the GBA being needed, we can't forget about Force Wars Adventures, a game I also had to play by myself. I only rented it from the local video store though. I wish I would have bought it before it became so expensive. A pretty fun 2D Zelda that I would even recommend to play by yourself, or nowadays it's quite easy to play it in multiplayer over Dolphin, the animal, not the other thing called Dolphin. Back to RPGs, since there were tons more, but let's stay on the GameCube just for a little bit because it may not have gotten that many, but one of them was Paper Mario 2, so none of the others would have mattered anyways. To this day it's still the second best Paper Mario, with Super Paper Mario being the best one. Already looking forward to being insulted in the comments for this take. Everything about the game is just lovely, even the backtracking. Gumbella makes all that walking around worth it. We also got the first real Pokemon RPG on a home console with Pokemon Colosseum, which is great because you start with Umbreon, one of my favorite Pokemon. In Germany we call it Nachtara. For on the go you got the remakes of the first generation with Fire Red and Leaf Green, and if you wanted to have something challenging for your GBA, you could just get Fire Emblem the Sacred Stones instead. And the list can just go on and on. Shin Megami Tensei 3, Shadow Hearts Covenant, Knights of the Old Republic 2, the first Fable, Tales of Symphonia, Way of the Samurai 2, and I would even name Sudeki. I had my fun with it when I recently played it for the first time. Somehow I just love the art style of it. It reminds you of those times when those learn how to draw manga books were big and most of those art styles looked extremely bad. Last but not least, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. I can't imagine playing it without all the fixes nowadays, but I'm happy I got to experience it at a later date, because I may have hated it if it was still too buggy and felt too unfinished. Probably one of the best RPGs on the PC, and play it if you haven't yet. It felt good still being a kid back then, because how else would you have so much time to just play all of those RPGs alone, even without all the other following games that are also fairly relaxing. Pikmin 2 got rid of the time limit, which makes it way more relaxing because you don't have that clock ticking down in the back of your head. It's up to you if you like that change or not. Throw your dumb little Pikmin around and watch them suffer, if you suck at the game, like I do, or try to keep them all alive. I think I would be able to beat Elden Ring without getting hit once before I could ever complete a Pikmin game without losing a single Pikmin. So, while Pikmin isn't totally relaxing, you can just relax in Harvest Moon and Wonderful Life. Wait, you can also die in that game, but that's just life. Eventually, we will all be 6 feet under, or go turn into ashes or whatever you choose. Just throw my ashes into the trash or something. I have to say, this game was maybe one of the first disappointments I had in my life, and after I got bored of it, I just went back to nature. But I know this game has lots of fans, so I wanted to mention it. And the most casual and relaxing game of them all, The Sims 2. It basically improved the formula in every aspect and just let you live out your life in a Sims world. We all created us and our friends in it, who burned to death because one of them tried to bake a pizza, but their cooking skill was too low, so they burned the whole house down, right? Or you turn yourself into a Giga Chat who plays tons of sports instead, even if you were the complete opposite and just enjoy staying home the whole day. I couldn't come up with a better transition to sports and racing games. We were blessed with the release of the original Trackmania, still the one I played the most probably. I even still have that big poster from the case inside of it. Maybe I should hang it onto my wall. It's just arcade racing at its finest, especially back in the day. I spent hours of my days playing it online on those servers that only had maps under 30 seconds to try to become the number one in those 5 minutes till it changes to the next map. And even building my own maps and trying to build them around the length of my favorite songs from that time. I still remember building one that was almost 10 minutes long because of Green Day's Jesus of Suburbia, since I loved that song so much. Pro Evolution Soccer 4, where it felt PES really came into its own, and for me 4, 5 and 6 will forever be the best football games ever made. Spending hours in the Master League looking around for cheap talent to form into the best players ever, sucking with the default team and having it feel like your players are actually bad, unlike in FIFA back then, where a guy who sucks with his stats can still just shoot a free kick like prime David Beckham. Burnout's Retakedon, probably my favorite arcade racing game of all time, with Trackmania. How can a game that has one of the best My Chemical Romance songs be bad after all? The sense of speed, barely passing by other cars to fill up your nitro bar, using it to make your screen blurry as fuck, bashing other cars into the guardrail and see their car being totally destroyed. I love destruction physics in car games. Seeing a car being just dead feels fun to me, and the difficulty is also perfectly mixed. Regardless of how much we hate the rubber banding, we also kinda love it, right? And there's also Tony Hawk's Underground 2. Underground 1 pretty much perfected the games, and Underground 2 didn't really add too much to it anymore, except for the crazy story because it hopped onto the Jackass hype. As a kid I loved it, and I still do. I see people saying it aged badly because that phase of MTV is over, but it's nice to always have a reminder of those dumb but entertaining shows from your childhood. What else is a game with Underground 2 in its title? Yep, Need for Speed Underground 2. Despite not enjoying normal racing games with normal cars too much, even I got into all the tuning stuff. Maybe Pimp My Ride also helped with that. It's just pretty cool to buy cool new upgrades for your car and make it look like the coolest car ever with flames on it. Flames are still cool. If I had a driving license, I would put flames onto my car. Don't judge me. But in 2004, it wasn't only games that released, but also Nintendo's biggest handheld ever saw the light of day. Sadly, with a launch lineup that isn't really worth talking about except for Mario 64 DS and Project WAP, also called Feel the Magic. It's a bunch of minigames where you have to impress a woman. It gets pretty wild and it was even made by Sonic Team. Mario 64 is obviously not a bad game, but why would I play that version if I can play the original? It controls worse and the newly added characters don't add too much sadly and actually destroy the pacing because I don't want to go back out of the level just to pick Wario to get back into the level so I can break some stupid walk for a star. The added minigames were great though, so actually it's better than the original. So 2004 wasn't really all about the usual bing bing wahoo, so Sony fans actually had the upper hand that year when it came to Jumpin' Ones because we got Ratchet & Clank 3, Jax 3 and also Sly Raccoon 2. The 3 big cartoony mascots all releasing a game that year. Unthinkable nowadays, especially since they're dead, except for Ratchet & Clank, which are kinda dead too since the newer games, so they just don't hit the same anymore and feel too safe. Jax 3 brought the trilogy to an end, and it's funny to me how the perception of the Jak games changed throughout time. Back then people loved the change from the more generic cartoony yippee-yay style of the first game to the more edgy Jak 2 and 3. Nowadays it feels people appreciate the first one more. I still love all 3 of them because I love happy games and I also love edgy games. Sly Raccoon 2 was more open than the first game, which always feels great when you're a kiddo. It makes you feel like, wow, I get more of what I already loved. For many it's the best Sly game, but I always kinda like 3 even more because of the minigames. I know, many people hate forced gimmicks and minigames and stuff like that in games, but my favorite Crash Bandicoot for example is also 3. I'm just a sucker for those. But with Ratchet & Clank I still prefer 2 a bit more because 3 focused more onto the combat and the levels always felt a bit more linear to me. Still an amazing game just like all of these, I miss this kind of Sony. Now it's time for the games for the adults, games only manly man such as myself can play. I'm actually not manly at all. Half-Life 2, the game that also brought us Steam, and I don't want to sound like a bootlicker, but imagine if any other company got the jumpstart on the biggest digital gaming market, PC gaming would still be going through the dark ages. The game itself is still one of the best games ever made. It just feels like an actual adventure, getting through so many places to try to reach that citadel off in a distance. And that gravity gun, every game should have one of those, even if they're not built around them. Another thing that Half-Life 2 gave us was Counter-Strike Source, an inferior version of CS 1.6. I still had tons of fun with it, but mostly on fun servers like Death Run, surf maps, minigame servers, gun game or also jail servers. I can't believe I actually loved playing on those and roleplay. I was young, okay? When it comes to actual gameplay, it kinda sucked in comparison, mostly thanks to the hitboxes. Using the deagle in Source though, no, that felt amazing, mostly because it was also really easy. Doom 3, a game that was fairly controversial not because it sucked, but because it wasn't what people really wanted. It was rather slow instead of you going around just banging some demons and go boom boom bang, and put a lot of effort into its atmosphere instead to make you feel a bit scared. Then there's also the first Far Cry that looked amazing for its time and still does. It feels like taking a comfy vacation before things just kinda get crazy with mutants and stuff. I'm a bit sad that Far Cry nowadays is just kinda whatever it became, the most generic open world shooter possible. Also it was made in Germany, so Germany mentioned. Unreal Tournament 2004, a game I mostly only got because of mods. Without this there might be no Rocket League or Killing Floor, since both of those started as mods for this basically. Here in Germany we had a show called Giga Games, and one of its sections was about PC gaming, where they sometimes would show off some mods for this. Loved watching that show, but could rarely watch it except for on the weekends because it started at 10 PM when it was already bedtime. Being a kiddo also had some bad sides to it. Original Xbox fans got their ultimate shooter on the console with Halo 2, and sadly I can't really say much about it since I never played it. But everyone knows how big of a deal it was, when Halo was still beloved, having LAN parties and all that just for it. Also they got Riddick Escape from Butcher Bay. I know it had a PC version too, but in my head I always see it more like an Xbox exclusive. I don't know why. Also, they got the best version of Ninja Gaiden, Black, one of the best action games ever made if we ignore the camera problems, and it makes you wonder how they never ported this version but instead always port the inferior Sigma version. They already used that word before it was cool. but it's not a very Sigma game. Even though it's still okay, but the original is the best. In return, Sony fans got the Halo killer, Killzone. That didn't manage to kill Halo at all, because they're really different games. But hey, you're gonna make up some storyline for the console wars after all. An okay shooter, but just nothing more, nothing less. When it comes to shooters on the GameCube, you were mostly out of luck, but hey, Metroid Prime 2 kinda counts as an FPS, right? Since with Metroid Prime 2 and Metroid Zero Mission, Metroid fans were feasting once again. Imagine being a Metroid fan during the Nintendo 64 era, not getting a single game and then suddenly getting 4 bangers in the span of 2 years. For me, Echoes is the best Metroid Prime game, and Zero Mission is the kind of remake that replaces the original, which I wouldn't say for 99% of the other remakes that release, but here I think it's a fitting statement. Normally I would always say it's worth checking out the original, even if the remake is good, but here it makes me wonder why I should ever play the NES version again, since it's just that much of a perfect remake. Katamari Damacy, a game I saw on the GamePro back in the day and thought, yep, I gotta try this out, so I rented it once from the video store, played through it and thought, yep, this game works. And it still does. A bit sad the franchise is pretty much over, but sometimes it's best to stop when there's nothing more to do with it. How many games can you make after all where you roll up things? I would take a new one anyways, as long as it's good. Back to a more personal pick, but I would recommend Ghost in the Shell on the PlayStation 2 to people who like third-person shooters and anime. Everyone loves anime, right? Even people who don't like anime would love Ghost in the Shell anyway, since it's one of those entry anime, like Cowboy Bebop. They're anime, but to people who don't like anime, they're not anime. You understand what I mean, right? The movement in the game is just really fun. When you talk about third-person shooters, you obviously also can't forget Splinter Cell, Pandora Tomorrow, and some other totally obscure stealth franchise called Metal Gear Solid with its third entry, Snake Eater. Some days you really do feed on a tree fork. I don't even want to put both games against each other since they are great in their own ways. I always preferred Splinter Cell for the actual gameplay and Metal Gear for the story. Not saying the gameplay of Snake Eater or the other Metal Gears is bad, because they're just having so many fun little details in there, but when it comes to the fun I'm having with it, Splinter Cell wins out for me. Unless we are talking about Metal Gear Solid 5, then that has the most fun gameplay. Story sucks though, so will I ever get the perfect stealth game that's super duper fun for me with also a great story? Only had a GameCube though, then you could also get the Twin Snakes, a remake from the first Metal Gear Solid, which is solid, ha. I often see people complain about the over-the-top cutscenes in it, and it makes me think how. You had stuff like gay vampires in Metal Gear Solid 2, but Snake jumping onto rockets is too much for you? Being able to shoot in the first person in that game kinda makes it pretty broken though, so you can insult it for its gameplay instead. But it has a Yoshi figurine, so don't even think about insulting it. Back to the more personal picks though. Under the Skin, and this is a game that's really hard to describe in just a few words. If you like quirky weird games from this era, I would just tell you to play it. You're an alien and take over humans and try to make lots of chaos happen. Rumble Roses. I mean, I was young, and when you're young and see hot women wrestle, then you're kinda like, yeah, I like this. It's one of those guilty pleasure games you just look back fondly on. As a non-wrestling fan, I'm not quite sure how much it stacks up in comparison to the WWE SmackDown vs. Raw games, but hey, it has hot women. That was and still is enough for me to enjoy a game sometimes. Lifeline, a game where you control it with your voice, and I love that it actually works, most of the time, kinda. It feels fairly ambitious because of that, making a whole somewhat normal game being controlled by your own voice. Nowadays I would mostly call it a streamer bait game because it's fun to watch people fail because the game can't understand a word 20 times in a row. Happened to me a lot when I streamed it, but my pronunciation and voice in general sucks, so I don't even blame the game for it. But there's two of the biggest games still left that made the year 2004 so special. If I had to pick the Howdy trio of games that changed the industry, it would be Half-Life 2, which I already talked about in the next two games, and you know exactly what they are. GTA San Andreas. Do I even have to say more? Still the best GTA game, and I don't think that will ever change for me. Most likely thanks to how big it felt with its world, and being able to do so many things. You could go to the gym, buy food, have a girlfriend, do this or that. There was just almost too much to do. Or even play it in its weird multiplayer that had a dedicated kiss button for whatever reason. You know what they say, make love, not war. Even if you most likely just spent your whole time killing all those poor NPCs with your friend and then just gave him a kiss. World of Warcraft, a game I never really played except for like 2 days when it eventually got its free trial version, since I was never a big fan of its aesthetic and was mostly already balls deep into Ragnarok Online. But you can't talk about 2004 without it, one of the biggest games ever, and it became the blueprint for most MMOs that followed it. There was no escape from it. Mr. T talking about his Nachtelf-Irokese in that one ad on TV.
Ich bin Mr. T und das ist mein Nachtelf-Irokese.
A whole family playing World of Warcraft on an episode of Wife Swap, or Frauentausch, how we Germans like to say, tons of news articles about the midnight release of it, news articles about people wasting a life on it, and so much more.
Alexander Opal ist einer von denen, die übertreiben. Er spielt rund 3 Stunden am Tag.
And obviously that one South Park episode. Even for someone who never played it really, you could not stop hearing about it. Everyone had that one friend who played it 24/7 and had worse grades because of it. I wish I could kinda talk more about it, but hey, would be unfair to the other games after all if I spent so much time on this one, because if I did play it for so many years, I could just make the whole video about it instead, since there's so much to talk about it, probably. But that also goes for most of the games here. Had to leave out lots of personal stories that nobody would care about. We all have those kind of stories we fondly remember and laugh looking back at them, and then you tell those to people and they just stare at you as if they were waiting for the punchline. So yeah, 2004 makes a really good case for being the best year ever in gaming, but in the end it's also up to you after all. For me personally, it's in my top 5 of gaming years, and maybe I will talk about those too one day. But since we are still in 2024, I wanted to talk about 2004 because it's 20 years ago. Life is really long, but also quite short, isn't it? Also, it's the year with one of the most hype E3 moments ever, the announcement of Twilight Princess. I can't tell you how much I rewatched that trailer on the GamePro DVD that month, and then rewatching the reactions to it on YouTube. I would have reacted just like this guy if I would have been in that audience. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video and will have a good day and good night or whatever fits your time zone, and now I will go quiet and wish for these times to return, when there were like 50 games each year that could easily win Game of the Year, in comparison to now where it feels like, yeah, there's like 5 games that could really deserve that kind of title. Sorry for sounding like a boomer.